Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's Policy and Resources Committee. I'll just run through the usual notes to begin with, and then we'll crack on with the agenda. Welcome to today's meeting. This is a public meeting, and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording, and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page on the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Okay, to the agenda, item 1, appointment of substitutes. Julie? None at all. Item 2, declarations of interest. Steve Cochran.
I just like to declare I am an allotment holder.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
For the Scala item, so I was involved in introducing a potential cinema operator to the council. I met with the operator and the council officers at the start of the process. After that, I've had no involvement and I have no prejudicial interest which prevent me from speaking.
That's fine, thank you. No one else? Marjorie.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a declaration of interest. I've just got a query. We don't have any substitutes, but Jessie Jagger isn't listed as one of the attendees at this meeting. So that seems like an inconsistent situation.
Okay, Sean.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jagger is here, who requested to speak on a particular agenda item rather than participate in the vote.
Okay, that's good. Anyone else just under declarations of interest? No, right, thank you very much. Public representation? None. The minutes of the meeting held 5th of September 2023. I'll just literally read through them page by page and then pause for any questions or comment. Page 1, 2, 3, and 4. Anything there anyone wants to raise at this moment? No? Good, thank you. And to 5. So, as we've already discovered, Councillor Jagger is here to speak to us this evening. So before we introduce the paper, I'd like to, Jessie, if you'd like to, you have 5 minutes, by the way, and we'll give you a little nod or something from the top here as you approach that, okay?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. I have a confession to make. I don't always like knocking on doors. There's always a tightening of my chest that occurs between ringing the doorbell and waiting for somebody to open, wondering whether they will be angry at me for a choice I did not make. Last year, before I was elected, when angry residents came to talk to me about what they perceived as wasteful projects, I made a simple promise. I said, if you vote for me and I see a project that is spiraling out of control, I will be as helpful or as annoying as I need to be to get some clarity. So here I am. I've tried to be helpful. Now I need to be annoying. I stand before you today with a heavy heart, feeling a deep concern over the direction regarding the Scala and the Corn Exchange buildings. We were told that a 500-seat theatre was no longer possible due to scaling cost. However, this doesn't make sense to me. I've spent some time looking at the documents relating to this project, and it seems to me that a lot of the issues come from faulty information. For example, listening back to the account from the July the 5th, we were told about a discrepancy between the cost estimated by the council's consultants and the cost quoted by the council's preferred bidder. It appears that the consultants got it wrong by about £2 million, or the council's preferred bidders got it wrong. As elected members, you can only make decisions on the information that is in front of you. However, what happens when you cannot have confidence on the information that is presented to you? What happens if today's consultants and today's quotes are not right? This is where common sense comes in. So we now have a proposal, the creation of a multi-purpose art theatre, which on the surface sounds brilliant. However, I can't help but see the red flags. We don't have to travel very far to see similar projects and how they've ended badly. The Artstrict in Bronsgrove, for example, for the last 3 years has struggled to keep its doors open. What is most disheartening is the lack or the perceived lack of transparency on the decision-making process. Looking at the council's Facebook page, it seems that a decision has already been made behind closed doors without a thorough examination of the facts, the quotes, and the risk assessments that you've taken into consideration for this. We were told in July that no commercial partner with a track record of a financially viable business in the entertainment industry could be found. The question is, why? I find it extremely unlikely. There must be hundreds of entrepreneurs willing to make serious proposals with a commitment for a long-term lease upon completion. And I found it shocking that the last options that were previously considered, none of them had any expectation of paying a rent to the council. Question is, why not? There are many disused old cinemas in the country which have been transformed into vibrant business centres, some of which make significant cultural contributions to the cities when they operate through tested business models. Why are we not learning from those business models? As a school teacher, I often get my students to vote between two choices. You can have a test or you can do 10 hours of homework. Shockingly, the test always wins with unanimous support. Let's be honest, they don't really have a choice. They were going to have a test. As a teacher, I control the facts, how I present them. They have little opportunity to really challenge those facts. After all, I am meant to be in charge in the classroom. However, in this room, the elected members are in charge. So let me ask you this. Are you satisfied with the choices in front of you? Or do you feel backed into a corner because if we don't make a choice, the grant money needs to be returned? Are you really in charge here? Because if you are not, then something fundamentally is wrong in the process. So next time, what will you feel when you have to ring that doorbell? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You can remain where you are for the remainder of the conversation or return to the public spaces. That's your choice. So we'll move on with the paper. David.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll start off by running through the recommendations because I hope that will help to frame thoughts as we go through the report. So the first one is to note the outcomes of the community engagement work that we've undertaken over the last few weeks. The next recommendation is to authorise the continuation of the design work at RIBA Stage 2 and 3 to support the concept of the arts venue with flexible spaces. The third recommendation is to authorise the continuation of the work to develop a preferred operating model based on the expressions of interest. Let me just turn the volume down on my laptop. The next recommendation is to note that a further report will be brought to committee at the earliest opportunity to secure approval to enter into a construction contract. We're not proposing, obviously, at this stage that we enter into any construction agreement. And then the last recommendation is to note that the outcome of the project review undertaken with the oversight of the major programmes reference group will be reported back at the next meeting. So where I'd like to start is with regard to the recent stakeholder engagement process that we've undertaken. At the request of members at the last meeting, this was led by an independent consultant, Candice Pearson, and you will see in section 4 the outcome of that piece of work. Over 100 surveys were completed. We hosted 3 public consultations here at the Guildhall, led by Councillors Bissett and Denham. We conducted 45 interviews and we had 30 tours of the building. And that, the details of that piece of work are included in the appendix to the report. As the outcome of that piece of work, I'll move on to section 5, which talks about the recommendations for the proposed use. You will see in paragraph 5.3, we set out a number of guiding principles, and in paragraph 5.4, recommend that the preferred operator should be the emerging collective of local creative organisations. And that was the main finding in terms of the research that we undertook, that there was a very, very strong expression of interest for a creative centre operated by a number of local stakeholders. I'll move on to the next section, which is the government engagement. I think it's fair to say that we've had a very positive discussion with the department regarding this project. They wanted some reassurance that this project still remained an important project for the City Council and that it still had member backing. And I reassured them of that point. Unfortunately, some local news headlines had perhaps suggested something different. They made the point in our discussions that the City Council has received all of the funding for this project under a non-ring-fenced grant agreement, and that is now with us, and we have the ability to use our freedoms and flexibilities to ensure that that funding is spent by the deadline. We also discussed the fact that the council does have, through flexibilities that the department have recently announced, we do have the opportunity to vary our outputs by up to 30% from the original project submission, which gives us a decent opportunity to stay within the government's parameters without having to submit a new application for varying the project. And we're currently doing some work at the moment looking at our cost-benefit ratios to provide the department with that assurance that we'll stay within those original totals to within 30%. So that was a useful discussion. In terms of the design update, which, and I'm doing it in slightly different order to the report, I apologise, but I think it flows better this way. So in terms of the design update, you'll see in section 3 that, of course, with a new emerging proposal working with the collective, we have not formally signed off REBA Stage 2 design work, because that is now being shaped by the discussion we're having with our hopefully would-be operators. So we still have some work to do before we sign off Stage 2 and move to Stage 3. And I'll reiterate clearly that is important that we work now with our preferred tenants, if you could use it that way, operators, to agree a design specification for the building. And finally, and I won't go through any more detail other than to say finally, in terms of risks and implications. I've already mentioned the fact that we have some flexibility with the government in terms of delivery of outputs. And I think looking at the original numbers and looking where we stand now, we think we can deliver those targets within 30%. And we believe that we are able to satisfy the government's requirement in terms of benefit cost ratio. I think members may recall that when we submitted the original bid, our BCR was something like 3.6 to 1. And although I don't think there's any hard and fast minimum requirement, the department has certainly said to us in discussions that as long as we stay above 2 to 1, that will be satisfactory, and we think that that will be perfectly okay. I think the only other thing I would want to raise now in terms of risk is, of course, the fact that we are now at an early stage talking to the would-be users of the building. And so a lot of work now needs to be done to get to an acceptable operating model for the business. We're not at that stage yet, as you would appreciate. We're at an early stage in developing that proposal, and we will bring that back to members at a later date. Just to remind members, in terms of the next stage coming back to this committee, we do want to move towards the submission of a planning application. We do need to get to a point where we have an operating model that we believe will be successful and viable financially in the medium term. And finally, of course, last but not least, we need to be in a position where we have agreement from our cost consultants and our preferred construction partner that the budget in terms of the capital build programme can be delivered within the funding that we have available. So at that point, I will stop and ask if there are any questions. I'll bring, if people want to talk about the collective, Sian will be happy to talk about that. And if there's any discussions around the finance, of course, as always, Shane's available to talk about the finance. But happy to take any questions. Thank you.
David, many thanks. Questions or comment, please? We've got Jabba and then Karen.
Thank you, David. Thank you to officers and for Candice for running providing a report and a consultation that at such short notice reaches out as many organisations within the city as possible, as broad as we could have possibly have done a public consultation. We reached out, we really did reach out to as many people and organisations as we could to make sure that no voice was unheard in this process. I mean, we heard earlier today that our fellow colleague speaker commenting on how concerned she was regarding the dangerous route we were going down in terms of the outcomes of this project. But I think what is failed to be recognised here is actually we took a spiralling situation that was out of control, that was spiralling out of control with no clear lack of direction and clear strategy. We took a grip of it and brought it under control through the collective will of councillors from around this chamber, and set a strategy that was top down and reversed it from to what the people of Worcester wanted. So that if that is not a definition of us taking control of a out of hand situation regards budget and strategy, I don't know what is, and I don't know what else is required of us. So I really do commend officers and councillors, especially our joint leaders here, that have enabled us to get us to this situation. So we need to be commended for that in terms of that. Going forward in terms of commercial operations, we've put the tenders out there. Very few people came back with viable proposals, and I believe the introductions that were made, officers have talked at length in terms of the commercial viability of those solutions presented to us, and we thought actually they didn't meet our own risk assessments in terms of long-term viabilities of that. It would have left this council exposed in terms of those opportunities, and none of the councillors around the table are going to make a decision that is going to leave us exposed in terms of that. So what we've come to here today in terms of the recommendations is something that is from the ground up, from the grassroots, from all the organisations that have a stake in this city, that have wanted to a space that was fit for a variety of purposes, that have come forward in a consortium. And this is what that the people of Worcester have wanted, and what the organisations have wanted. So I'm really, really pleased that we've got to this position with that, and thanks should go to all the people that have got us to this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with a lot of what Councillor Riaz has just said, and one of the things that gives me confidence from a construction point of view is that we are now engaging with a preferred bidder. And we know that in the construction industry, the sooner you get a contractor on board who can give you real reflection of what's happening in the market, when we know how volatile the market is the best that we could be doing. So to get those pre-construction discussions going, talking about enabling works and all the actual detail of the project, because this is a unique project. It isn't like a house that you can build off a drawing. They will come across things as the project goes on, and to get this expertise on board, that gives me great confidence, and I'm really pleased to see it. And I also want to say that I think Candice did a fantastic job. Her report's really good. She engaged with us the whole way, and she has consulted so many people, and actually I think now has brought people along with us, so that I feel confident that we've got people on the same page with the same vision, and the vision to provide something that this city desperately needs. So thank you.
Can I just add that I've spoken to Candice since the report was made available to us, and we are going to keep Candice on. She has, as you say, worked very well and with the stakeholders. So we are going to retain her services to continue the liaison with the consortium of potential operators, and give us that extra level of capacity to keep the dialogue going. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to colleagues. I'm really, really pleased by this report and where actually we've got to in a short space of time. It was an absolute kind of leap of faith, really, on my part, in terms of going out to the creative arts community of Worcester in order to turn around a project that was no longer deliverable in the form as planned. And that leap of faith that the people of Worcester has been validated, and it's been an absolute privilege to be part of the public consultation events, you know, and I have been contacted by a number of organisations and had some absolutely fascinating conversations. It's, you know, if you look on page 32, all those involved in the consultation, that's a pretty eclectic mix, which is really quite impressive. And obviously, you know, in terms of the quotes, you know, I recognise some of those because I was in the room, and I know, you know, the people that said it. So there's so much good practical advice that's come forward as part of this process. It has hugely increased engagement. I think, you know, there's a lot of knowledge and experience come forward, and from arts organisations that have survived over a period of time, that have demonstrated their sustainability when it's quite difficult to keep going. And it's really interesting, you know, we spoke to individuals who live in Worcester but work in different parts of the sort of creative industries outside of Worcester. And they're, you know, looking for the opportunity to do more within the city, not have to travel to Birmingham, not have to travel to Bristol. And, you know, and the Rising Festival in the Arches that took place last year also demonstrated that. So young people involved in the creative arts worked elsewhere and literally kind of found each other through that process and looked towards doing things together going forwards. I guess just to pick out two particular comments, because I think they're powerful. The most powerful one was the chap in one of the public consultations that said, start with the art. And where we had been building a building, but we didn't have an operational model. We didn't have an arts content for it. And creative arts people, you know, they're used to delivering a performance where they're required to deliver a performance, so to speak. So give them a space. You know, you can do Shakespeare in Commandery Gardens. You can do Shakespeare in a huge theatre. You can do it in the round with no props. So it is possible to deliver fantastic things in any venue, but start with the art and the passion for the art rather than the building. And then another really kind of practical piece of advice that sort of came sideways was about making the premises unlicensed during the day so that young people can come, that it isn't about selling alcohol and genuinely, you know, a multi-purpose venue that can cover a number of things. And it is that kind of flexibility and multi-purpose that, in fact, I think we're going to significantly reduce the risk of the long-term viability of the occupation and the use of the Scala. And I'm really hopeful that we have a really positive way forward. So thank you to everybody that's been part of that and for taking the leap of faith.
Got Stephen Hodgson and then Marjorie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm afraid this is very much a case of second best. And it could have been so much more. And I think, you know, it is sad it's come that it's going to end up with this. I accept the fact it is better than what's already there, and it is another facility we have in Worcester and that. But it doesn't really put us on the map. It doesn't mean that we will see some of the sort of touring, performing things that you actually see advertised in the paper, that when you hear them coming to Cambridge Corn Exchange or Turning in Harrogate or Cheltenham or places like that. We still aren't on that list. That could have been an opportunity for Worcester to be on that list. There isn't on that list. If we had the political leadership in this council, we would have taken a bold step. We would have found extra funding, and we would have built what we would have built. So I'm afraid I will be abstaining on the majority of these these proposals. What I say is, you know, good luck with the project, but I'm afraid it's, you know, it's not what was envisaged when my party was running this council.
Thank you. Marjorie Bissett.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to respond to Councillor Hodgson's remarks along the lines of, I actually think that that the vision we've got described here will be better for the city than a 500-seat theatre that touring companies can come to, because it can be an arts centre for everybody who lives in the city. And I think that's really valuable. You know, I think we're actually in a good place. And I don't know where we would ever have found the extra funding to stay with the original design. Thank you very much for the work that's gone into this. I really enjoyed being part of the consultations and meeting all those lovely people from chief executives of really important arts organisations to just individuals who had an interest. I think there's just two other things that I think we shouldn't lose sight of. One is we've got a lot of different organisations coming together, and they need to organise themselves into some kind of body that we can work with, so that we know that we're talking to somebody who's speaking on behalf of the whole group. And then we've always said that there's got to be self-funding, that we're not going to subsidise it. Is that still I hope that's still the case in the current climate.
Two points. Yes, we're bringing together, or we're not bringing together. There is a coming together of various stakeholders. There is no one single entity, so we are not going to be in a position anytime soon where we will be sitting down and entering into a lease arrangement, for example, where we will be giving a single operating company a 25-year lease on the building. I would like to think that will come in a period of time. As those organisations work together, I would hope that they will form a community company of some shape or form, a registered charity, and then that organisation with those initial stakeholders, perhaps as members of that company, can then take on a formal lease from the City Council. And I think that would be an advantage in a number of ways. First of all, it would give the Arts Centre an identity in terms of a company operating it. And secondly, if it was a registered charity, it would be able to access funds that the City Council, as the landlord, couldn't access. So I think there are great advantages in doing that, but I think it will take a while to get to that point. I think the view that we can sit down in a very short space of time and say, here's the heads of terms, can you sign that? That's not going to be the case. So I think where we are now is that I would envisage that we work with the partners in developing the proposal. We work with them in putting together a viable business plan, and in the fullness of time, and it sounds like I'm talking about years and years, and I don't mean to be years and years ahead, but in a relatively comfortable period of time, we can then get into a position where they are a viable business. I think in terms of council funding, it was our original intention when we entered into discussions with Worcester Theatres that the current subsidy that we give Worcester Theatres would transfer over to this new venue. As it stands, Worcester Theatres will continue, and councillors at the moment have not made any decision with regards to future funding for Worcester Theatres. That's a decision for members at a later date in the future. It depends how the budget position moves on. What I would say from our perspective, it may be that in the interim period working with the partners, we do have to consider some funding. I think it's fair to say at the moment we are talking about some C-Chord funding with those partners at the moment, because that would do two things. It would prove to them our commitment and confidence in them to deliver this project, and also these are busy people running their own organisations, and we can't expect everybody to come to us and work for nothing, you know, frankly. So there probably will be some funding requirement, but as yet, we don't know what that would be. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Adrian Gregson.
Thanks, Chair. I just, while you talk about, you know, the middle distance, paragraph 6.3 and 7.1 say the funding needs to be spent by March 24, and 10.4 says commitment to spending needs to be achieved by March 24. But your projections are taking us beyond March 24. So what's the position in terms of the grant funding?
I'll just say a few words, maybe a few more, and then Shane may wish to comment. The reference to the grant support wouldn't be out of the capital project money that the department has given us. So the deadline on spending the capital grant is as per the report. What I'm referring to is in terms of some longer term funding, maybe for 1 or 2 years, would be revenue support to keep the business viable, and that would be out of council coffers, and it would be revenue funding. So I'm making a distinction between the two.
I appreciate that. If I may, just before Shane responds, we're about 6 months away from March 24, and you want to get this group together to agree heads of terms, to get a planning application through, and to presumably give a contract to a builder, all in 6 months before that. Is that what we're looking at?
Yes, in a word.
Okay, who else? Did I have anyone else? I'll take Jabber again.
I suppose the question is, Chairman, is that in terms of any decisions we make regarding the design stage of the building at this next stage, will it then be flexible and versatile enough so as to, if this consortium proposal was to fail and not to anything come to it, that the building will still be in a flexible enough space if a commercial operator were to come along to say, actually, we could make a go of this in the state that we've left it in?
We're aiming by bringing the consortium together with the cost consultants and the construction company and the architects to come up with something that provides the flexibility and the best possible chance that that space will be viable across the whole building. Now, it may well be, that when we get down to talking about individual specifications, we will have to cut our cloth accordingly in terms of if we're having a number of studio spaces, they won't all be fitted out to the same design specification in terms of lighting, audio visual, acoustic treatments, those sorts of things. So we undoubtedly will have to cut our cloth accordingly in terms of the specification. But now we have an operator, so to speak, or a number of operators, it's much easier for us to sit down now effectively with the end user and understand what they would need to make it viable. So that process is ongoing. In answer to your second question, in terms of it being fit for a commercial operator, then it would depend on what that commercial operator wanted to do. If they wanted to operate it in a similar guise, it would probably be fit for purpose. If they wanted to do something different, then obviously there would almost certainly be new fit out costs that would need to be found to cover the cost of changing the internal building structure or acoustics or whatever to meet their need.
Thank you, Chair. If I'm correct in my understanding, we've received the capital funds through from okay. are the costs of officer time and are they being charged to the capital fund that we've already received, or are they being charged as income or revenue rather? So if they're being charged to capital and we have to return these funds back to the government, are we at risk as a council that we're going to have to somehow compensate for the revenue that we've lost in terms of officer charge time? Does that make sense?
Through you, Chair. Yes, this makes sense. We, because of the somewhat peculiar nature of this grant, that it's an unring fence grant which has been provided to us in advance, we have control over how we use those funds within reason, and that they must be applied to the project as we've agreed it with the department. Up to that point, whatever spend that we commit is already funded. So as long as we can demonstrate that it is for that purpose, then it's capital in nature, and we can use some of our salary costs to allocate for capital purposes where it's directly involved in the construction of the assets, then we're free to do that. And however much we've spent up until the point we say, we can no longer achieve that ambition, and we get to a position where we may have to repay some of that money, there is no provision for any clawback within the agreement. So as far as we're concerned, it's down to us to manage that capital funding that we've received effectively and properly. And if that means extending the timeline, for example, of the project, we're able to do that as long as we can defray the expenditure on other parts of our capital programme. This is a term that the department uses called freedoms and flexibilities, which enables us to use the money effectively in the best way that suits us. As long as we continue to deliver the project, then that won't be a problem. Okay.
Roll
Chair, thank you. Obviously, this project has got off to a long, sort of auspicious start, and I think in a short space of time, to be fair, officers in the council have made steps and mitigating responses, which is good. But I'm just still very, very concerned about the timeline and the time frame, and I'm just looking for more assurance because March 24 does feel awfully close. Thank you.
If it's a budget timeline you're concerned about, I'll let Shane answer that, as you would expect. If it's around other aspects of the project, yes, you're right. We need, I was going to say get a wiggle on, but yeah, yes, time is not on our side. But I think I'm being optimistic, if I'm honest, because we've now got a group of occupiers, operators that are able to sit down and talk about the building specification and what they need and what they don't need. And I think for the first time we can get everybody in the same room. So we can get an architect, we can get a cost consultant, we can get a construction contractor, and we can get the potential end users in the same room and talk about the specification for the building and what's required. And we can talk about how much money we've got as well, and what we can deliver for that money. It would be nice to think that we can deliver everything that those operators want within the budget. But if we can't, I think that the advantage, for want of a better word, of going down the route that officers are recommending is it does give us some flexibility in terms of fit out of the building. So it's not if it was a 500-seat auditorium, it would be a 500-seat auditorium or not, whereas this does give us some flexibility in design specification.
Through you, Chair, just to add in terms of the budget timeline, the department has recognised the pressures across the country in terms of delivering the Future High Streets Fund grant, and have now agreed publicly that they will extend the timeline through to September 24 if requested to do so. In our case, we don't need to request to do so because we've already received the money, but it's in recognising in the department's mind that if we extend to September 2024 before we're able to commit all the funding, well then that will be agreeable because it's agreeable with other councils up and down the country. So in terms of the context, we're confident that we can get in place all of the things that we need to put in place to get this, we have a preferred bidder on board. We're working with a group to develop our model. We are a long way down in terms of the design elements of it. So we have every confidence that we can get to a point where we can commit to completing this project by April, and failing that by September 24.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any more hands, so we will go to the recommendations. My intention is to take 1.1, 1.4 and 1.5 and simply inquire whether you're happy to note. Is that the case? Okay. And then we move to 1.2 and 1.3 that require a show of hands to authorise. So 1.2, those in favour, please show. Those against? Abstentions? And 1.3, the same, please. Those in favour of authorisation, please show. Those against? And abstentions? Okay. So we move from 5 to agenda item 6, Future High Street Fund, wider programme update. David.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just scroll down to get to the report. So, as members will know, the Scala and Corn Exchange is just one element of our Future High Streets Fund programme of activities, and we thought it would be useful to bring you an update on where we are with the wider programme, and also seek approval to market number 8 Angel Street. And if there are any technical property questions, I'm sure Kevin can jump to the table and answer anything that's difficult. I won't go through the background. I'll just talk about the 3 elements in front of you in the report. So first of all is the property enhancement scheme, and I'm pleased really to report that a total of 15 grants have been awarded to the value of £428,000 for the property enhancement scheme. I was asked on social media a couple of weeks ago what the City Council was doing to ensure that our new arts centre didn't sit amidst a derelict area of the city with damaged facades and broken paving. I did resist the opportunity to enter into a discussion on social media. Even though it was a good news response, I thought better of it. But nevertheless, I'm pleased to say that we have many hundreds of thousands of pounds of grant support in place. And if any of you have walked along Angel Street and looked at those properties, there are some photographs in the report, but you'll see that it's starting to make a real difference to those frontages. It's not just the shop fronts that have been repaired, the upper stories have been repaired so that they can now be let. There is some planning outstanding, but all in all, it's gone very well. And just to give you a further piece of information, so the money we're putting in is up to 75% of the capital value of each project. Nick, who's my expert on this, sitting at the back, informs me that actually in some cases the owner occupier or tenant has put in a significant amount of funding, which is greater than their 25% contribution. So whilst the figure from the City Council is 428, it amounts to probably, well, over £500,000 of investment in properties along that area, which is very, very good news. And we're very pleased that it has gone that way. The next area I want to talk about is the public realm. Everybody will have seen the work that we're doing there, and I'm pleased to see that the quality of work is very good. Some of you may remember that we've had problems in the past with the quality of the work on the public realm, and I think in this case it's fair to say that it is very, very good. So we're very pleased with the work. And in section 5.4, you will see the phasing of the work. You'll note that Foregate Street is currently underway and is slightly ahead of programme. Just to remind members, the other things that are taking place is the relocation of the crossing point. At the moment, line across the road from the station to the arches. We are on track, there's a pun there, for the demolition of the property directly opposite Foregate Street. We have planning permission for that demolition. We now just need, he says, we now need to agree a window with Network Rail in terms of when that demolition can take place, because it needs, the upper story needs to be taken down when there are no trains running along the track. So hopefully that will be sometime in the new year, and that will fit in rather nicely with the public realm improvements that are taking place on Foregate Street, the relocation of the crossing and the relocation of the bus stop outside of that area, so we don't have buses sitting in front of Foregate Street Station blocking the design line. So I think that's going extremely well. And then you'll see phase 6 is the Angel Street design. So once all the property improvement work is complete, we will then start on the repaving of the area to add that final element of quality to the space. One thing that we are doing also, which I think is really important, we're raising the level of the paving so that the access to the new art centre will allow wheelchair access at the front. At the moment, you have to go up steps to get into the building. So the pedestrian access will be at grade, it will be level with the raised public realm. So that will help us in terms of giving greater access to the building. So yes, I think that's going very well and we're very pleased with that. The final element to this, and you will be wondering where we've got to, is the Angel Place itself. We have commissioned some work by a company called McGregor Coxall of completed draft designs. But obviously until we have finalised the use of the buildings in terms of the Scala and the Corn Exchange buildings, we've not been in a position to bring options and recommendations to members. It's very important that the space outside the building works to reflect and enhance and complement the activities going on within the building. And so until such time as we've been able to define exactly what we're going to do, we've not been able to bring those public realm designs forward. Now that we are moving ahead with the design and shape of the building, we will be coming forward to members with some recommendations with regard to how we enhance Angel Place and increase the amenity value in that area. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions.
David, thank you. Questions or comment, please? Adrian Gregson.
Thanks, Chair. I had a question really on paragraph 5.5, and I do see Nick Kay is in the room. I mean, As chair of the Arches project, I'm very pleased to see that we are now on target to come to do the demolition. I've had a word with ASLEF and with Network Rail, and believe we've got some dates lined up for you.
Thank you.
But I just wondered really that once the work is done and the facility to walk from Foregate Street down to the river is fully realised, whether there is any scope, any cash left in the scheme to just review the crossing on Farrier Street, because the footway will take you as far as Farrier Street, then you have to cross over Farrier Street with that very sharp bend, unsighted under the railway bridge to continue down. It's not, I know it's not, it's Cherry Tree Walk that you continue down. Never totally sure of the names of the bits and pieces around there, but I think you know where I mean. And there's a little yellow box signposted on the plan that you can't read. So I just wondered whether if there could be some consideration of that as part of the scheme at this late stage.
There you go. Okay, yeah. Do you want mine? Okay. I don't mind. Okay, through you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, what I will say is that if there is some elements within the Arches Cultural Development Fund, and we do have a public realm budget as part of that, obviously this wouldn't be covered under the Future High Street Fund, but if there is, so we say, once we've demolished the former Jack's building, and we will be able to then look at the wider connections from Foregate Street down to the riverside and see if there's any enhancements that can be incorporated.
Thank you, Chair. And a quick question about the property enhancement grants. It's nice to see such improvements being made. I remember approving some of these grants and wondering, would we ever get a chance to see the improvements once the work has been completed? I can see we've got a couple of properties that you've taken or provided pictures of. Will there be further such photos?
Yes, I think it's fair to say that we can provide additional information, photographs and publicity. As part of the grant agreement with the landlords, there is a clause that that states that they will agree to future publicity. So they've signed up to this programme with the understanding that if the council wishes to make any more publicity out of it, then they're willing to participate. So yes.
Thank you, Pat Agar.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to check with Sean about the legal issues here. Those of us who are members of the Planning Committee, do we have any conflicts here?
Thank you, Councillor. You're being asked to approve, really note an update on the property enhancement grant scheme, which is well underway, and the decisions on individual grants are already delegated. So you're not being asked to vote on allocation of grant tonight.
Yeah, I should have picked up on 8 Angel Street, shouldn't I, of course, in my rush to conclude. So members will be aware of the 8 Angel Street building, which sits opposite the Corn Exchange. Originally, this was part of the Future High Streets Fund programme. A while ago now, we agreed with the department that we would take it out of the programme, and we have done some soft market testing, for want of a better description, with some success, and we are now seeking agreement from members that we will formally put the property on the market. I think I think it's fair to say that the uncertainty over the Scala and Corn Exchange has caused potential investors to pause, just to wait to see what's happening. Now that we're back on firmer footing with the Scala and Corn Exchange, we would like to take that property to the market and see what interest we get from it. So I won't go into any of the particular detail in here regarding costs and background and where we got to, other than say that that's the recommendation to members, that we go to the market with that, with number 8. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Linda.
Thank you very much. Yes, I mean, certainly the investments from the property enhancement scheme are becoming visible, in places. It's a pity in one sense that the looseness of the kind of the government agreement means that, you know, it is public sector money going into private property, which will enable them to potentially increase their profit margin, and there isn't a payback mechanism. But on the other hand, you know, to get those properties proactively used, and potentially some residential, is to the benefit of all. Yeah, I mean, so moving on to Angel Place, I mean, it's a useful reminder that the original work was drafted over the winter of 21-22, and actually quite a lot has happened then. Not least, and if I can, I mean, either ask the question or put on the table, now as to how Angel Place should be used does depend what we want it to be. Is it going to be an outdoor performing area? Is it going to be a play park? Is it going to be, you know, a mini park with trees and things? There are a number of options. And what I think is really important now that we've signed off, you know, some new policies and strategies, and the plans for Angel Place need to be looked at in the context of those. I'm talking about the active travel plan, the city centre transport strategy, and the play plan. And I think, you know, how we use that space needs to be looked at in the context of what we've agreed and our aspirations on those. 8 Angel Street, yes, that is an important decision that you're looking for us to make tonight, for that to be marketed. We can only hope that it is of value and that we get a reasonable bid. I think it is important to know the potential to keep those options open, and the potential for housing. I think we shouldn't forget that as part of the original bid of the totality of the Future High Streets Fund included a housing and affordable housing, and it would be really good not to lose that, and actually to revive that as a potential. I also can see, you know, looking at paragraph 7.3, there's a very practical interim usage for that site. Doing building works on the Scala could be incredibly disruptive, you know, for buses, for the market, for all sorts of things, and actually to be able to use that building in a practical way could be a really useful, you know, for a short period of time. So important to bear that in mind. But yes, happy with the progress that's been made, and well done to everybody for that, and happy with the recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Any further comment or questions before we go to the recommendations? No. So I'd just like to actually echo the point that Lynn was making about making Angel Place a place to visit, and a place to stay, because we've spoken at length about getting people into our city centre, and this is one of those areas that you know, for all sorts of reasons, has been on the margins, shall we say, for a number of years, and we need to do everything we can to sort of correct that. Whether I'll go along with each element that Lynn describes is not a matter, but the basic point about making Angel Place a place to visit and stay for time, bring the family to, etc., is I think one we'd all agree with. So to the recommendations, the noting at 1.1, everyone happy with that? 1.2, the approval of the marketing of 8 Angel Street for sale by private treaty. Show of hands, those in agreement, please.
Yes, that's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. And we'll move on to agenda item 7, medium-term financial plan update. Shane?
Thank you, Chair. Those members who were with us last week, looking at the position with regard to the budget, will know that the report is slightly out of date in terms of the amount of savings that we've achieved so far. So that figure, which is shown in figure 1, which shows progress against the budget gap target of 2.191 million, that figure has now risen to 2.339. So we have met the original target of 1.7 million and the secondary target of 2.25 million. So we made a substantial progress towards reducing the budget gap, to which I'm grateful for everybody who's contributed to that, including the committee, of course, who have allocated a number of, agreed a number of proposals which help us to bring ourselves into a position where we're back on a financially sound basis that we've been trying to achieve. That's not the end of the story, as members will also be aware. If you look at table 1, you'll recall that we made some financial assumptions back in February that would reset us on the basis of a kind of normalcy, which was happening before recent years. It's now evident that that's not going to be the case, that we need to revise those assumptions. And once we do that, start to think about what salary inflation and non-pay inflation is likely to be like, offset by some benefits in terms of income inflation, we see that gap then moves back out to around £500,000. So although we've made huge strides forwards, there is still some way to go in order to bring things into the balance that we're looking to achieve. And we'll continue to work on that over the budget setting period and on into the new year. Most of those savings, the substantial ones, are parts of administration, some of which have been quite beneficial, but a number of required policy changes or changes in the level of service provision. And table 4 shows those which we've considered here to date. The savings totals which I mentioned include, of course, achieving further commitments yet, and there are 3 which are for consideration at this committee. The first of those is one which is follows a previous decision in terms of the splash pad in reducing the operating times of the fountains, in this case at Cripplegate Park and South Quay, so to bring them into line. That will be a saving in terms of maintenance and operation costs in the region of about £21,000 a year. The next 2 are to do with following also a principle which we've agreed previously at committee, that where we have discretionary services, the costs of those should try to be offset by a level of income, which will be primarily met by those who are users of those discretionary services rather than funded by general taxation. The first is in respect of allotments. So there is a significant subsidy for those, and a review of charges for our allotments has shown that we are quite low compared to many others in terms of what they charge. It's obvious, though, from the details in the report that to try and increase that to 100% recovery of costs at short notice would be very arduous. So we're proposing here to a gradual increase. The first year would reduce the subsidy by about £14,000 a year, and we can then have an opportunity to review and consider how to progress that. And the third is the Worcester Show. So we considered this previously and made the decision at that point that we would look for a voluntary contribution rather than charging for the show. That was put in place and generated a small amount of income, which was unfortunately offset by a significant increase in the costs of recovering that income. So we want to revisit the principle of charging for the show. I mean, it can be argued that that helped in sustain the show for that 1 year, but it's not a sustainable position going forward. So we need to continue to address that. And again, taking the principle that we wouldn't try to recover 100% of the subsidy in one go, we're proposing here a charge of £2 for each adult who attends the show, which would reduce the subsidy by 27,000. Sorry, to 27,000, giving a saving, bear with me, of 26,800 in the first year. So again, that's something that, because it's a gradual approach, we could review that after the first year and see what that looks like and see whether or not we want to revise that further. Those are savings which could also be included in the report. The other element that is contributing to this is our voluntary redundancy process. So that is now largely complete. And we've made significant gains in respect of that, if all of those are finally achieved. And that is offset by costs of £560,000. That is for redundancy payments and also contributions to the pension fund in respect of the lost income for those employees. So that gives us a payback of 1.25 years, significantly within the limit that we set for this scheme. So it represents very good value for money in respect of that. However, those costs have to be met. And in the past, we would have met those from unallocated reserves. But as I've mentioned on previous occasions, there are now very few reserves which are not allocated. So we need to go through an exercise of reallocating some of the reserves which were already committed. Now, some of those reserves have not been needed because the income for the project or the expend on the project has come from other sources. In some cases, the project has been delivered at less than the estimated cost, so those are available to be reallocated. And in other cases, policies and priorities have changed, so we want to look again at whether or not we should reallocate those reserves. Now, in order, there's a lot. We have over 100 of these allocated reserves, so it's a lot of work to go through them all. So we tried to sort those a little bit and try to understand them, but I think it's become evident in the last week or so that there are still some things which need to be clarified in terms of whether or not there are commitments against those existing reserves. So I'm proposing to change, if it's acceptable to you, recommendation 1.5, simply to agree to the principle of reallocating previously agreed reserves to meet the cost of voluntary redundancies and seek a further reallocation of reserves to meet the remaining budget gap. And in the past, we have done that by having a meeting with group leaders, myself and Mark, and gone through all of the reserves in detail and identified those which can be freed up and those which are still committed. And then we will bring that back to the next committee to agree and understand that we've got the right set of reserves to free up there. So we will carry out that exercise and bring the report back in November, and failing that in the December meeting to make sure that everyone's happy with what we're proposing to remove or reallocate from the reserves. We can manage the cash flow in terms of using the business rates reserve to pay for the redundancy payments, etc. But we need then to reimburse that from these reallocated reserves. And as always, we'll bring back further reports once we've seen how the impact of these looks. And my apologies for the final paragraph, which is obviously failed to update from the previous report. We do need a detailed impact assessment of the changes which we're proposing, and we'll bring those forward in due course. Happy to take any questions, and Lloyd's available for any more detailed elements which cover his areas. Thank you.
Shane, thank you very much. Mel Alcott.
Chair, thank you. It was just a couple of things really. Just a big thank you to the officers and to members. I know what a difficult time it's been, and I think what a difficult time it will continue to be. If I may just read a couple of lines from a recent LGA bulletin. Obviously, we know what happened to Birmingham City Council, and we know other councils are at risk. And if I look down at the numbers, we said councils in England now face a funding gap of almost £3 billion over the next 2 years, and that's just to keep services standing still. And obviously, council's ability to mitigate these pressures is being continuously hampered by one-year funding arrangements. There will be the autumn statement in November, and I would very much like to see a change, but I suspect with the upcoming GE and looking at the action coming out of the Conservative conference that we won't see a change, and
we will continue to see another difficult year. But I just think if you run any business, you can plan, you have 1 year, 3 year, 5. We've not been able to do that for so long, and you've continuously worked under really difficult circumstances, and I appreciate and I welcome all the difficult decisions that we've had to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comment, please? So I've got Robin, Norfolk, Marjorie, Bissett, and then Adrian and Stephen. Robin first, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, officers, for the report. I just want to speak to items 1.2 and 1.3, if I may. Having just left the Republic of St John's from a public meeting where huge disquiet was being voiced about councils not consulting residents about plans that were taking place. The prospect of shutting down Cripplegate Fountain fills me with some dread. I'm sure you can imagine on a summer's day, Cripplegate Park being full of people and the fountain in full flow and everybody just enjoying themselves. It is a shame as well, I note from the report contents, that we don't talk about keeping Cripplegate Park fountain running and shutting the South Quay fountain down. It seems a bit perverse that we talk about shutting South Quay down, shutting Cripplegate down, but not South Quay. I'm reluctantly going to support 1.2. On 1.3, I have allotment holders in my ward who are in receipt of benefits, and I'm just wondering how the impact of removing some of those subsidies is going to impact their enjoyment of their allotment. So I just wanted to point those two things out. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Lloyd, please.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies if we've not made it clear enough within the report. The recommendation isn't to shut Cripplegate Park fountain. It's to run it in line with the time period that members recently approved for Gelville Park splash pad. So that's May the 20th to the 1st of September. So apologies if that's not come across clear within the...
If I may, I did pick that up. It's just of the options that were reported or the options that were presented to us. It's shut down both, shut down Cripplegate and keep South Quay open for, you know, the same hours as the splash pad, but no option discussing, and I understand the reasons why it would be unpalatable to completely shut down South Quay. It's just, once again, St John's residents are being pushed to the bottom of the queue as far as priorities are concerned. That's the only thing I wanted to say on that.
Okay, that point is noted, but again, just to clarify for members, the preferred option in respect of both South Quay and Cripplegate is to operate them in line with the recent decision taken for Gelville Park splash pad. So I think that's May the 24th to the 1st of September. The second point around allotments, again, we've set out within the report, having done some benchmarking, there is particular headroom. You know, our current allotment fees are very reasonable compared to other councils and other sites. And again, as part of the proposal, we're not looking to do away with concessions. We are looking to standardise them at the 25% discount. So yes, we're not saying there won't be any impact, but we are trying to mitigate that impact. But, you know, I just underline that our current fees and charges, we do believe, are very reasonable when compared with other sites and other councils.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy with the recommendation for the fountains in the city, but I do want to raise some points about the recommendation on allotments and the recommendation on the Worcester Show. So, first of all, allotments. I think this is the right approach to put the fees up, and I can see that our fees are reasonable compared to other councils. But I think there's a few opportunities for saving money that we're missing. Well, two anyway. First of all, if you look at the national benchmarking figures on page 63, you can see that many other councils, for example, Rushmore, What you pay for a half plot is not half of what you pay for a full plot. It's more than that. And the same with a quarter plot. That isn't a quarter of what you pay for a full plot. And for every plot, there has to be some administration costs, a proportion of the cost of the officer, for example. So why not adopt a structure like that rather than going for a flat quarter, half, and full price? Are you all with me? Yeah? And the other thing I'd like to mention is that I'm not sure there should be a concession for over 60s. My first thought was that if there was going to be a concession for older people, it should maybe start older, because it was probably set at 60 back in the day when people retired at 60. But now I'm thinking maybe we shouldn't have one at all, because we want our allotments to be available for people who are struggling financially, but older people who are in that situation will be okay, because they'll be in receipt of benefits. So that's. Shall I end there and we'll go back to the Worcester show later on? Right. Okay. I think I'll end there and I'll come back to the Worcester show later.
The fact that you're describing those who are approaching 60 as still young at heart. That's,
too late for some of them.
Adrian, please.
I'm approaching it from the other side, I'm afraid. I was just interested in paragraph 6.2 and the strength of that paragraph. The installation is not designed to be an interactive water feature, but is a visual feature as part of the wider regeneration upgrade of South Quay as part of the Millennium Project. Of course, the fountain at Cripplegate Park is not interactive either. It is, if people choose to jump in it, that's a different thing. But it is not an interactive installation. And it occurred to me that if we had pursued my recommendation back in 1999 and we had gone with the proposals that came from Thomas Heatherwick, who at that time was an unknown sculptor and landscape designer and is now an international star of great renown, then not only would we have not had an interactive feature, we would have had an extremely exciting visual feature as part of the wider regeneration and upgrade of South Quay streetscape, which would not cost us any maintenance costs.
Yes, it's quite depressing reading this, and I have to say, I think this is going to affect people. I mean, the fountain in Cripplegate Park, and also the reduction of the South Quay fountain is a disappointing thing. But obviously, they are expensive things to operate, and fountains need to be turned on when the majority of people are going to see them, and not at a quiet time when there's relatively few people in the actual park and that. So I've thought I can exit, but I think, it's not ideal. Regarding the reduction of allotment, I mean, that to me is actually quite disappointing, because I know with the health and well-being hat on, and we want to encourage people to grow fresh food and that sort of thing, we are making it more expensive for people to actually do that. And when you look at Worcester's prices compared to other places, we are sort of in the higher quartiles of that particular thing. When I come back, I will be taking some more interest in the Warden Villages allotments that the parish council looks after, and just see where we are in terms of relationship, because I'm sure our waiting list for our allotments in Warden parishes will pick up on the actual back of this. But I think the most alarming thing is the actual agree to make Worcester show completely paying. I mean, as we saw last time, taking money is an expensive process. So it basically, you know, you're spending money on nothing, but you're taking money. So the first bit of tranche of money you get, you're not actually getting back. People can argue they're paying their council taxes and stuff, and you know, and they'll not get anything from it. I think, you know, I think it is a bit of a kick in the teeth to all our voluntary sector in our city, and that where people can actually go there on a summer's day and that sort of thing. And I just wish we could have, we would look for things like, you know, sponsoring some of our marquees and things like that, and just finding some other ways, and being pragmatic and saying, well, you know, this is something that does cost us, but it is an investment in the people and the communities of our city.
Thank you, Chair. I'm relieved, Shane, that you said that we will be looking again at the detail of this in committees, that it's actually an in principle decision in 1.5, because I don't think we've discussed all of these details before. And there are some of them that I think I would have problems with. The child poverty thing, I believe the money's being committed. Whether or not it's being spent, I don't know, because I'm not on communities. But I do think the various committees, particularly communities, need to take a look at some of these items quite closely before we just sweep them off the board. It may be that they could be reduced, but I do think we need to know whether they're necessary or not and what they're for before we just, you know, make a decision.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, indeed, they need more consideration and further detail. Just in terms of constitutionally, it is the Policy and Resources Committee only which has the responsibility for allocating reserves, and it has the responsibility for reallocating reserves. So when we've made a decision at this committee to allocate something which could then be owned by one of the other committees, it's then that committee's priority and remit to defray the expenditure once it's received reports. So for instance, like the child poverty one, we've been to health and wellbeing and identified a set of activities for that funding to be used for, but it's in the nature, in that case, of spend over time. So it hasn't been all spent yet, but it's committed to that particular activity, so it should be retained for that particular activity until such time as the committee decides it's no longer needed. So there is a little bit of a journey to work through in terms of responsibilities for the funding and how it should be used. And in the past, as I said, we have worked in detail with group leaders to go through them and understand clearly what the position is. And if there are those which the committee here decides need to further consideration at the relevant committees, then that's the approach that we can take. I'll come back to the point which I've made previously, that we have to deal with this. We've got to, you know, it's got to be done, and it needs to be done through Policy and Resources as the primary committee for making sure that we can set a balanced budget at the end of the day and we can meet our costs. So there is a bit of a journey to go on yet with this, and I'll try and make sure we do that as carefully as we can.
Thanks. I mean, the one I didn't expect to see was Offerton Lane Nature Reserve. I've sat there before and watched herons and ducks and stuff. It's been lovely, but possibly some volunteers might take care of that.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously in Arboretum I've got a couple of allotments, and I know that there's a big waiting list for them, and they also have water. What I'm a bit concerned about is I can see on the benchmarking a lot of local authorities do not charge a water charge, because I don't know how you will make sure that people who haven't paid for it aren't using the taps. And also, you know, if there's an extreme drought and someone hasn't paid it and all their plants die, I think that'd be extremely disheartening. But could we do some work to help allotment holders put in water butts and things like that to help them collect water on their site? Because I know that on the allotment I was on last week, the allotment area, there aren't many sheds and roofs. You know, I think it needs to be a little bit of a project if we're going to do this. I think using less water is a really good idea, because obviously, you know, that is a problem as well. But that might not help you with your budget, of course. So I think it's a little bit complicated. I don't really know. Would the site rep have to enforce this? you know, how would it work? I don't know. I'm really supportive of maintaining the discount and concession. You know, food growing is extremely important, and obviously with our increasingly unequal society, it's really important that we support people who are on lower incomes. So I think that's really important, and thank you for doing that. Thank you.
Yes, Chair, and can I come back on a couple of the other points as well, Chair, that have been made? Is that okay? So just to pick up Councillor Lewin's point first of all, I think when you look at some of the other councils' charges, I do wonder whether the cost of water has been included within the overall charge. So there may not be a specific charge for water, but it may have been included in that. I think you're absolutely right. If we were to place a separate water charge, there would be risk. I think we would be operating on a lot of trust, and it would involve the site reps monitoring, but ultimately it would involve us as a council needing to step in if we need to through the allotment officer. What the legal route for that is, I'm not entirely sure, but I think the key point is it would be based predominantly on trust and goodwill. So that hopefully picks up Councillor Lewin's point. Just to go back to Councillor Bissett's point around charges, again, I defer to Shane on the model around increasing the half a plot and a quarter plot charge to be more than a half and more than a quarter. I'm not sure whether that would increase the income derived and therefore benefit the sort of subsidy position better. But I do recognise that some councils do that, but I don't know what the impact of that would be. And in respect of the age policy, I think from memory, Environment Committee reviewed the terms and conditions around allotments probably 2 years ago or so, and we did make a policy change on age. So basically, the age of people who benefit from a concession goes up every year by 1 year. All right. So in 6 or 7 years' time, he would have moved from 60 to 67, so to speak. So that should reduce the number of people who are benefiting from an age-related concession. And again, just finally, Chair, if you don't mind, just to pick up on Councillor Hodgson's point around how the show is delivered. We had a very clear direction from group leaders probably 2 or 3 years ago around how the show is delivered, and that was in-house through council officers. And I think perhaps as we move through next year and into next year, you know, perhaps that's something officers can look at about alternative delivery options for delivering the Worcester show, and we can test that again with group leaders at some stage. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just relating to the concessions. It was just looking against the council's website and what we're offering. The council's website on concessions talks about those with a disability, but then it goes on to list the benefits, and it talks about a list of other welfare benefits that are not related to disability. So can we have some clarification on the concessions, if that's possible, if officers could look into that? And generally, in terms of the allotments, looking at the concessions, I think it would cause great hardship to a number of residents in Worcester who, for them having an allotment is actually talking about putting food on their family table at the end of each day. So we really need to think very carefully about removing concessions. For a lot of people, having an allotment is something that they enjoy in retirement, but we need to be encouraging as many people as possible to take an allotment, particularly where it's a source of food for their family. And I don't think we need to discourage them by removing those concessions.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Rowan, for the comments. We can certainly take the concession point away, and Councillor Rowan, if you think we have something missing, then please let us know. So that's the first point, and the second point is again point taken on the concession point, but again just to reassure members, we're not looking to remove concessions totally. What we are looking to do is to standardise them so there'll be one single advanced 25 concession, a 25% discount, not remove them totally.
Any further questions to this debate? Mel Alcott.
Chair, just brief one on allotments. Obviously, I guess it is costing the council money at the moment, so we do need to make savings. I am correct in that assumption, and I think our charges aren't particularly high compared to other councils. Am I correct in that?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. I guess I'm kind of attempting to maybe to summarise to some extent, because we've got a kind of smorgasbord of decisions in front of us, which indicates, you know, the financial challenge that we have, and demonstrates that officers are looking, and that we are looking sort of rigorously at all opportunities to balance the books and to be as fair as we possibly can to our residents. So thank you, you know, in terms of the level of progress that we've made to date, you know, and a really kind of clear explanation as to how we've achieved that. As to what the government gives us and trying to deal with that is really, really difficult, you know, as more and more councils are finding, and compared to some, Worcester is doing better. So, you know, well done for officers for not having pitched us into the level of risk that some organisations, some councils find themselves in. So that's the first one. With regard to the fountains, you know, the recommendation, I would support the option of equitable access to water features across the city, so that having the same hours of operation for the splash pad, for Cripplegate and for the quay. I mean, it is interesting to see the level of cost involved in those, and the fact that, you know, the South Quay, you know, the need for an external company, specialist company. I mean, is that to do with knowing that children play in it, and there's sort of Legionella and kind of health and safety issues? I'm getting a nod from across there. Yeah, which just kind of demonstrates in terms of planning and long-term planning, understanding. But option 2 about reducing the hours to the period of warmer weather, and where they are most likely to be used, and for that to be fair. Excellent. Review of allotment fees and charges. Where you've got to, firstly, there is an enormous amount of complexity, isn't there, around our charging structure, as with other things. So there is some potential, I think, for simplifying that. Absolutely vital that we maintain concessions, and that, you know, and that recognises the importance of allotments. It's, you know, it is although they're in planning terms, there's a recommendation for the numbers of allotments that should be provided. It actually is discretionary. They are important. They're an important part of health and well-being within our city in many ways. Where we've got a waiting list of 300 people, you need to say that kind of in terms of market forces, it can bear an increase in charges for those that can afford it. And the taxpayer shouldn't be subsidising those that can well afford it, I think is the key message. So supporting option 2, which is a step towards cost recovery to reducing the subsidy and retaining the concessions. Charging for Worcester Show, maybe Worcester people are not quite as generous as some members hoped they might be. And again, it's where I think Worcester Show is a really important part of Worcester life. What is being proposed is a £2 or recommended, and that's, you know, I support the recommendation. £2 charge per adult, so no charge for under 16s. £2 is a relatively modest amount. I know that may be difficult for some. I think we should also bear in mind that the audience for the Worcester show are not entirely Worcester residents. So there is the question around Worcester council taxpayers subsidising a nice day out for other people. So I think, again, to retain the show is an important part of community life, and to agree to a £2 charge for adults is a step towards reducing the subsidy, and then following the show next year we can look at our financial position and the success of the show itself. The voluntary redundancies is a programme, so in terms of this, actually the decision is about how we use the reserves. So thank you to Shane. I think the principle of using unallocated reserves is the right one, but the devil is in the detail, and I think members need to look at that detail elsewhere. I'm absolutely certain we will be able to release substantial funds, but I think we need to understand what we're doing in making those decisions. So thank you, and hopefully we've got a steer with the way forward.
I beg your pardon, Marjorie. I'll take Marjorie and then a brief one from Mel if possible. Get the both of you, okay? Marjorie.
So just quickly on allotments, will you consider that proposal of mine to make a half allotment cost more than half of a full allotment? I mean, it's in other words, do I need to raise an amendment, or can I just trust that you'll look at that possibility?
That isn't the recommendation as part of this report. So again, I'll defer to David or to Shane or to Sian, but that seems to me as though that may be an amendment. But happy
to be guided by that, Sian.
Yes, I mean, I think you can add that to the original proposals, but you'd need to vote on that amendment, I think.
Okay. So
I'll have to quickly come up with some words then.
would be useful, please. Yes. Sorry, Lynn.
So I just wonder whether it's possible again to have an agreement in principle without the absolute detail of it will be £17.34 for a half.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you see
I
what
wouldn't
I
want
mean?
to go that far.
Because there is a level of complexity around the charging. So if officers can work with because this is about budget setting. This meeting isn't about setting fees and charges potentially. Does that help us?
Okay. Any comment from you guys before we navigate our way through?
We could, I think, agree to, if that's a particular element, agree to delegate that particular element to chair and vice chair, however you see fit, or we could bring that element back to another meeting, if that was the preferred way of doing it.
Through you, Chair, just to simplify things, I mean, the recommendation is agree to revise fees for use of allotments to reduce the annual subsidy by 14,100. So there may be other ways of achieving that by different means, and we can return to the actual fees to be charged through the Income Management Committee through the budget setting process and put a different proposal there if it suits and brings us to that point without needing to revise this recommendation, I think.
But Councillor, if you want your words as part of the resolution, it could be something like including consideration of partial fees for partial plots.
The only thing is, I'm afraid I'm a bit of a the detail person. It might turn out that we can save more than 14,100 if we do that. So does that matter? No, probably not. So agrees to revise fees for use of allotments to reduce the annual subsidy, including having fees that are not strictly linked to the size of the allotment, or that's not quite right, is it? Okay, all right. You all know what I mean, don't you?
David,
If we take out the number, then it becomes a very difficult recommendation in terms of we're not agreeing a figure. I would suggest the way Shane suggested is that it comes back as part of the fees and charges. Probably be the best way of doing it, and then you haven't got to make the decision. If you agree to the principle, we can do it through the normal process of fees and charges.
And can I now speak to item 1.4, the Worcester Show? Okay. Yes. Okay. The Worcester Show has changed quite a lot in the last few years. It's moved site and it's become quite big. And I believe that in the few weeks running up to the show, it requires an awful lot of officer time. So, and of course, we are our budget is squeezed and we don't have as many staff as before. So what I think, and also my fellow Green councillors, is that the time has come to have a bit of a review of what the Worcester Show is for and how large it should be and who should run it. So I'm happy to agree to introduce entry charges for next year. What I'd like to propose is an amendment. So after 1.4, we get, and to review the principles on which the show exists, including its size, its purpose, and its organisation, and report back to this committee before May 2024.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've mentioned this to a few members, sort of informally, and I think myself and Sean and we at CLT have discussed this as well. We are intending on bringing a review report back to PED committee on the Worcester Show. So that seems to me to be the forum to discuss how this year's show went and any changes proposed for future years.
Yes, please, sorry. I just wanted, again, revert back to the Worcester Show, and I think any changes regarding the principle, etc. of it, that isn't now for P&R. We're looking at budget savings. That should be for the relevant committee. But I just wanted to mention the Three Counties Show this year. The cost of a ticket was £27.85 for a day, and their attendance was 96,000 footfall. The average dwell time was 6 hours, and I just think the Worcestershire Show has been a real success, and I think if you do things for free, people don't always value them. I think £2 is a sensible no-brainer charge, and I think we're here today to review charges, not other addendums to the Worcester Show. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Happy to take this to the vote.
Just Chair, just regarding Councillor Bissett's amendment, I'm assuming she's, it's withdrawn, yeah? Okay, fine. Thank you.
That's carried, Chair. That's carried. That's carried. That's carried.
Thank you. This report summarises the main points of a detailed business case prepared by specialist electrical consultants, Ridge, in liaison with officers for an extension of the photovoltaic panel array on the top deck of St Martin's Gate multi-storey car park, and recommends that we tender a contract for the works to install these, delegating the award to Shane, subject to there being no material deviation in the business case as presented in this paper. The feasibility study reports that an arrangement similar to what's on the top deck already is provided, and that's the array of PV panels on top of a steel frame deck. The proposal would be for an array that's 5 times the size of the existing installation. The total cost of the works is estimated to be around 520,000, including fees. At current rates, so the current rate that council pays for its electricity, which is about 24p per kilowatt hour unit, the electricity generated would amount to a gross saving of over £58,000 a year. Now, the installation would require, you would in effect lose 1 space for every 3 spaces that there is there at the moment, because to allow sufficient width between the stanchions. So we'd need to factor in the loss of some car parking income, but the top deck tends not to be fully used outside the Christmas trading periods. And taking into account the loss of that revenue and the maintenance costs involved, but also the cost of borrowing for the capital cost of doing the installation, then the net return, as I say, at the current prices we pay, is around 13,000 per annum, or about a return of 2.5% on the £520,000 cost. However, I would draw your attention to paragraph later on in the report, in that these figures are based on what we currently pay for our electricity, which is around 24p per unit. And as from next April, although we don't have a confirmed rate at this point, our electricity costs are likely to be increasing to around 30p per unit. And therefore, this investment at those rates would produce a gross annual saving of around over £70,000 a year. And when you take into account our borrowing costs and maintenance costs, we're looking at a return of nearer 5% or over 5% on that £500,000 initial cost. The report, there's more detail in the report. What I've given is just a headline summary. In terms of the funding, P&R and Council has previously approved the allocation of some over £700,000 in the capital programme for photovoltaic arrays at St Martin's Gate and also at Purdiswell Leisure Centre. Now, the estimated cost in this feasibility study is a little bit over what we'd factored into the capital programme. However, we have been working on the feasibility study for PVs at Purdiswell Leisure Centre with a different set of consultants. It looks like that we would still be able to afford Purdiswell Leisure Centre within the scope of the current capital programme allocation. However, I would say that we have submitted an application to the Sport England Swimming Pool Support Fund for grant, that's 100% grant towards the cost of installing the PVs at Purdiswell Leisure Centre. And obviously we will bring back the full business case for that particular project once we know the outcome of that application. So I've summarised the main points. There's more detail in the report and happy to take any further questions.
Kevin, many thanks. I've got Stephen Hodgson and around the floor if necessary.
Yes, I've got a couple of points here. I mean, I remember many years ago, Councillor Roger Knight first suggested this, and it's really good that it first of all came in an initial format that we've got at the moment. And I think this as well, obviously, appears to be a viable project, but I have a couple of questions. One is really relating to the actual car park itself, because I sat on a review of our car parking about 3 or 4 years ago, and one of the things that was in the reports we were given was about the life expectancy of the current St Martin's Gate car park, and where does the life expectancy of this solar panel installation tie in with that? And for example, if the car park, for example, became unfeasible for whatever reason, but the equipment on top was still viable, could that equipment, first of all, is there a risk of that happening? And if there was, could this panel be re-sited somewhere else or on a replacement car park? And also, secondly, about the space on the top. I know you talk about the loss of spaces and that, but would the 2 spaces you get in 3, would they be any bigger than a standard 3-car space, bearing in mind the size of cars today, which do need wider spaces than when that St Martin's Gate car park was originally commissioned?
Thank you, Chair. In answer to that, in terms of the life of the car park, obviously the car park is something that we have a structural engineers inspection, an annual structural engineers inspection, and as things stand at the moment, we don't have any doubts on the life of the car park. This business case stacks up on the basis of a 20-year payback for the photovoltaic array. Obviously, that is subject to us kind of looking after the car park as we should. And again, in our repair and maintenance programme, in our asset maintenance programme funded by the capital programme, we're allowing for the resurfacing of the top deck in the next year or so. In fact, after this project takes place. So I think I would have the confidence that as long as we look after the car park and prevent rainwater leakage into the decks, then we should be confident that the car park is going to have a satisfactory life. The second point of your question, Yes, the spaces, 3 spaces down to 2 does mean that the 2 spaces in between the stanchions will be bigger than what's there at the moment. In fact, if you go and look at what's there at the moment, the current kind of array, that gives an idea of how big the spaces are.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions or comment? Karen Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased about us applying for the Sport England swimming pool funding grant. Obviously, a lot of councils have actually closed their swimming pools or reduced the hours of opening, and they do cost a lot too. Energy use is very high. If we are successful with that grant, does it mean that the money can be used for something else, or we won't spend the money, or we could have even more solar panels? Thank you.
I'm going to put that question back to Shane.
Through you, Chair, it depends. As always, the grant will be come with certain conditions, and we will see what it looks like when that arrives. I mean, the application is specifically for these improvements in respect of energy. It is a capital. They've already had a revenue round, which clearly wasn't suitable for us, but the capital one is one that we should do. In the event that the solar panels, don't turn out to be feasible or don't work, and there may be other changes to the leisure centre, then we would apply back to the department and see if we could reuse the funding as normal. It just depends on what the grant conditions are at the time. Really. Sorry, am I not answering your question, Karen?
Sorry, it's just because we've allocated, quite a lot of money to do the solar panels ourselves. But if we don't have to spend it, can we spend it somewhere else? Or does it become an unallocated resource that we get back?
Through you, Chair, it's neither. It is the capital spending. So things go into the capital programme when we identify that we're going to commit to that spending, and then we fund that from a variety of sources, which include capital grants, capital receipts from sale of assets, or borrowing or revenue contributions. So in this case, it would be a capital grant. So either we would have to agree that we can use that capital grant for similar purpose at the centre, or we'd have to pay back. So no, we wouldn't be freeing up any capital funding to be spent on something else, unfortunately.
Frustration, I find. Mel Orcott, Pat Agar, Adrian Gregson.
Really quick question, and it's probably a bit daft, but just there isn't any rack, is there, in St Martin's Gate car park? Are we assured that?
No, there's no rack.
Thank you. I'm slightly scarred by County Hall, so thank you.
Thank you. I mean, in relation to what Shane's just said, I mean, this sounds like a really useful spend to save project. I mean, the point is you spend capital and the effect is on revenue, as much as anything. The only, I think this is excellent, but the only thing I would like to ask, please, is what's the lifetime of such photovoltaic panels?
So I was going to say 20-year or 25-year, 25-year life.
Okay, no, that works. Yeah, that works.
You, Adrian.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was just really going to support the proposal, really, and hope that we can give unanimous support to it, because so far this evening, the Conservative councillors have managed to abstain on anything of any significance, abrogating any responsibility to make reductions, and also on the Scala. So it'd be interesting to get a unanimous decision on this one, won't it?
Any further questions or comment? In which case, I'm happy to go. Sorry, Lloyd. Marjorie, forgive me.
Only to say that as far as I'm concerned, this is a no-brainer. It's definitely something we should do.
Okay, so at that point, we can go to the recommendations, 1.1 of which is to approve the business case for the extension of the photovoltaic panel, etc. Those in favour, please show. Okay. And 1.2, delegate the award of a works contract to the corporate director, subject to there being no material deviation in the final business case post-tender. Those in favour, show, please.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Excellent. So we move to item 9, which is AOB, and I'm not aware that there is anything that qualifies as such. So I will then move to inquire whether everyone's content to move to item 10, which will be in closed session. Happy to do so? Do you not?
No, it depends
Fine.
if people wish to.
No, I mean, obviously you're aware of that, so if you wish to. Yeah.
There's no need to unless people want to debate the appendix, because we've moved the recommendations over.
That's fine. So, happy to take that steer. So happy if everyone is content to call the meeting to a conclusion. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Good night.